Hi again everyone, it's me again. Okay, so to continue on from where I was at, I've just covered the inside envelope flap with a piece of dictionary page, and I'm now going to put some napkin on it. Now, for those of you that haven't done this technique before or seen this technique before, you just go and get pretty paper napkins. Now, they are made up of normally 2 for the cheap versions or 3 for the slightly nicer versions layers of paper. And what I'm going to do here first is I'm just going to cut off these extra bits just so as I can make it a little bit easier for myself. And sometimes when you cut into it, it does lift the layers apart. Right, so that's the kind of rough size that I want. Okay, so let me just show you on here. So this is the napkin that I've now cut up. So I've used these top 2 parts, and you've just seen me cut this part off. This here is the edge of the napkin. You know where the bit where it's all embossed? Well, we need to remove these paper backs on the back of it. Crafty Irina has a little technique that she uses where she uses a tape and puts tape on the back and then lifts it, and it lifts off the layers. The way in which I do it is I just run my thumbnail diagonally across to the corner. I don't know whether you can see that, but it's just lifted off. Mum. So it's just lifted off this corner a bit here. So I can now pull off that first layer. And then if I run my thumbnail across again, it's a very delicate process though, because it's such thin paper, it can tear. And then you just pull off the second paper back in. Can't speak now. Okay. So as you can see now, you've really got a really thin, a flimsy bit of paper. Now this one I haven't separated just yet, and you can't really see the technique that this creates. But if I show you with the thinner version, you can now see the text of the dictionary page that I put behind, and it will show even more shortly once I've glued it down. So I just need to now remove the paper back in here, because I've already cut this one to size, and I've cut it as opposed to ripping it. The reason why some people just rip it is that having the slightly more jagged edge, this then blends into the background, whereas leaving it as a sharp cut edge, you can see the definite line. So I'm actually just going to just pull away some of this edge here, so that it gives it a slightly more jagged edge. And of course you can rip it around specific shapes as well. So like I showed on the previous video, I'd ripped around one of the butterflies. Let me just see if I can, there we go. So this was the napkin that I used for that, and I just ripped around the butterfly and the ladybird, and that was what I glued on. And I'm just going to rip this edge down here. It's just cutting it to size. I know that it was going to fit on the envelope. And I'm just going to rip along this edge. I'm only ripping along 3 edges though, because I don't mind one of the straight edges, because that's up against this edge of the envelope. There we go. That's now all ripped, and then when I glue that on, it will show that text below. So I'm just going to eyeball where that napkin is sitting, so that I know roughly where to put my glue. And the good thing is it doesn't matter if this glue extends beyond where the napkin is going to go, because it will dry. Excuse me. It leaves a slight sheen, does the PVA glue, but it doesn't look massively out of place. And as you can see, I'm just spreading it about with my finger again so that I've got a nice even coating, because now this is going to make this napkin really delicate. So I'm only patting it, but as I'm patting it, the glue from underneath is actually starting to seep through to the front of the napkin. Okay, and now you can see, hopefully my camera is picking that up, that you can now see the text of the dictionary page coming through from underneath. Some people then add glue on the top. What you need to be careful of again is, as I say, because the glue is already seeping through this napkin, it becomes quite delicate, and so you can leave that section to dry before you then put some more glue on, because if I put glue on top of this now and tried to start smearing it about, it would actually start to rip and tear this paper napkin. So I'm going to now leave that to dry, but it is the sort of technique that I now can't close my book, because that will stick to this page, so I need to leave this open for it to dry. I'm going to start working on the front cover, and I don't know whether you remember, all those many moons ago, from the video that I did in the beginning, I said that I was going to use this image from out of the gardening magazine that I'd got. Now, because magazine paper is again quite flimsy, what I decided to do was attach it to some card to give it some support. So what I did was I layered it up with 3 layers. So I used the card that I used for the inside cover, and then I've got this lovely sparkly glitzy paper, and it's a smooth one as well. So I stuck the image onto here and then trimmed off the excess, so I'd left a little bit of a border, and then I glued that then onto here, again doing the same thing. So if I just line it up in that top corner, so it was that kind of effect where you've got the gap here and then you've got the gap here, but you need to make sure that that distance is equal around all 4 sides. And so it just frames this picture, as well as giving it that little bit of extra support. Now, the other thing that I chose was, I then found that I'd got these sparkly brads, and I'm going to use them in the same fashion as I did on this journal here. So I put 3 brads on the picture here, and again this was layered in that this was the image, and then I layered it onto a darker paper behind it, which now just frames that actual picture. I'm going to put the brads on, but I'm only going to put 3 on, because there was no point putting the 4th one on, because it was going to get covered over by all the flowers and leaves. And so, hang on a minute, I've left me doings over here. There we go. I've got my doings. So I'm going to use my polystyrene block, and I'm going to use my pokey tool, and I'm just going to poke a hole on 3 of the corners. And then insert my brad, my sparkly brads, through the hole. Hopefully I can get my eyes in focus. There we go. Open it up. So that's now secure, and it just adds that bit of sparkle to the picture, which now matches up with the sparkle that's around the outer edge. Of course, you don't have to add brads, you could add buttons. The pink buttons that I've got here would have looked lovely with it, but they're not small enough. I would actually only add smaller buttons. God, these brads don't open very easily. There we go. I would actually only add the smaller buttons In fact, let me just show you a smaller button so you can see what I mean. So I've got this pot, look, of little teeny tiny buttons. So if I put the larger button on, you can see it just totally overpowers the picture, especially if there was 3 of those on. Whereas if I added the little teeny tiny button, having 4 of those on would frame it just quite nicely, and it's small enough that it's not overpowering the picture. But as I say, I'm using the sparkly brads. I'm adding the sparkly brads to just match up with the sparkle around the outer edge. Alright. Now I'm hoping, yeah, that's dried enough for what I need it to be. I'm just going to tie this up because otherwise it will keep springing open, so that I can show you the front cover and again the thought process that you need to go through. Alright, so I've got my picture and I've got my front cover. Now it's a case of whereabouts do I place this. So I could place it in the centre and that would look quite nice. I just think that sometimes just placing it slightly higher, that it just makes it look nicer. But I'm also going to move it just slightly off centre and move it nearer this opening edge, because I know that I'm going to put some lace down here. So if I put that in the centre, when I put the lace on, it's actually going to encroach over the top of my picture. So I'm going to move it just slightly off centre. What I would suggest, let me just have a slurp of tea. Oh, that's better. What I would suggest is just position things to find out where you want them to go before you even think about gluing them in place. I did contemplate, I've got this pretty little lace, which I'm actually going to put some of this up in my shop over this coming week. I did contemplate putting some of that lace underneath the picture. Thought that looked really nice. But I knew that I wanted the lace down the edge. So if I then added that lace down the edge as well, it just was too much. The balance wasn't right. So I decided to take that one out and just use this lace instead. Now, as you can see, because it encroaches so much of this front cover, it then requires you to move it across slightly to the right hand side so that it becomes balanced again. One of the problems that people have is layering, and I have to say I'm not the best at it. I think it's just one of those things you either naturally have the talent for, or it's something that you learn to do with time. But what you could do, like I did on this one here, was I just cut out a little piece of lace and just stuck it up in that corner. So although I cut that out straight, the 2 straight edges, I would actually cut that at an angle or even curved, or even follow the lace pattern itself, and then just position that so that it's underneath up in that top corner. Now when I have a look at it, I don't like that sharp corner there, so I'm actually just going to trim that off a little and make it a bit more rounded, and probably the same on that side as well, just a touch more on that side. And that, yeah, that goes all right up there. Excuse me. So this I'm actually going to stick to the back of this. And I'm just going to use my PVA glue again as the basis. But because there's a brad there, it's not going to stick properly to the brad. And so what I'm going to do is use my trusty micro pour, if I can find the end. There we go. And just position that over there, and that just makes sure that that is now held in place from up there in that top corner. And then I think that down in this bottom corner here, I'm going to do the same as I did previously on the other journal. And I'm going to add a couple of pale leaves, and as I say, I'm just going to position them to have a look. I haven't made my decision yet, so I can position those down there. It doesn't matter that they overlap because I only want the points showing. And then I've got these pink flowers, one of those I think, and then maybe a couple of these smaller ones, of which some of them are a bit sparkly. Excuse me. And also the darker pink, which matches up with the, ooh, they're escaping, which matches up with the colour of the